Welcome to Between Two Pastries, a not-so-typical nutrition podcast. Nicole and Annie are licensed and registered dietitians. Join them as they discuss hot nutrition topics, challenge popular beliefs, and have a blast doing it. Here are your hosts, Nicole and Annie.
Welcome to Between Two Pastries, everybody. This is Nicole.
Hey everyone, it's Annie.
Annie, did you want to introduce our guest today?
Oh yes, I do. Today we have my client, Brooke Miller, on the podcast, which is pretty awesome. I'm really excited that she reached out and wanted to be on the podcast. And I'm going to let her introduce herself. So take it away, Brooke.
Hi everyone, I'm Brooke. So I'm here today. I'm a super passionate individual about mental health awareness, specifically raising awareness, being a face to the name of it, giving examples in my daily life of what I deal with, both struggles and triumphs. I have OCD, I have anorexia, and I also have a new diagnosis of bipolar. So I'm here today to just help increase access to resources, decrease stigmas, and raise awareness to these different mental health illnesses.
So Between Two Pastries is ultimately we're dietitians. We talk about food, we talk about weight and body image and sports and all of the different things. So what brought you to the Between Two Pastries podcast in terms of, you want to talk about mental health, but what really highlighted your desire to be here today?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, this podcast talks a lot about food.
Yep.
And I think I listened to the podcast and it's been very interesting to me as I listen, because I feel like I listen through two sets of lenses. I hear the podcast through my eating disorder, and I also hear the podcast through where I currently am in my recovery and the experiences that I've had getting from point A to point B. So that really made me want to reach out and just ask for the opportunity to be here with you guys today, just to talk more about that.
Well, I'd even like to add a third lens, because even just with working with you, you have your rational brain and your irrational brain, right? And your rational side from a mom standpoint, a professional standpoint, working with the OCD group in Wisconsin, you see, you know what I mean? Like you see it as someone who doesn't have a mental health issue as well. Right. Like like there's multiple points of view and you can rational, like that's wrong. But yet your eating disorder brain says this and your recovery brain.
Yeah, exactly.
Says this. So it's really, really a cool perspective that you can offer. And I think it's good to note too, like when Nicole and I talk about disordered eating or eating disorders, it's not always just that. Right. Like this stuff coincides with anxiety, depression, OCD, could be depressive disorders like bipolar. There's so much more going on that I think people forget about that. They want to isolate and compartmentalize each thing, but they come in like together. Right. So Brooke, tell me a little bit about your history. When did this start for you? What happened? What's been your pathway?
Yeah, sure. So I've had obsessive compulsive disorder since I was 8, not something that I figured out or received the appropriate treatment for until I was about 26 years old. So I had been in treatment for my OCD for years, kind of in and out. And a lot of my OCD in the beginning, contamination. I was really concerned about toxic things in my environment. I developed orthorexia because I was very concerned that anything non-organic was toxic and was going to give me cancer or somebody in my family cancer. My OCD was also very focused on thoughts that if I didn't organize things a certain way or position things a certain way, I would receive phone calls that loved ones had died. So there was that kind of direct interaction or connection there. So these were the things that I was working on with my therapist. Unfortunately, what I didn't know or wasn't super familiar with at that time is that OCD can change. As you get older, as you experience more things, it can really warp itself and just decide to latch on to different opportunities that come into your life. So in 2016, I started experiencing relationship OCD, which is very taboo. A lot of people don't talk about it because it's very uncomfortable to talk about. But pretty much what that meant for me is just history real quick. I met my husband when we were 15 years old. We were sophomores in high school, and we have been together ever since. We've been married for 13 years. And so I love him so much, and he's such a great supporter, and we make a great team for our two children. And I would never want anything different than what I have for the relationship that I'm in. Unfortunately, my OCD in 2016 started to tell me otherwise. So I started to have intrusive thoughts and vivid images of being with other people. And ultimately, this affected people that were close to me, which is very characteristic of relationship OCD. It likes to affect the people that you care for, the people that you love, people that are close to you. So it started with some of my colleagues that I worked with, and then it moved to some of my really close friends. And it really got in my head, and I connected those thoughts to, I have a very strong, what they call thought action fusion. So where if I have the thought, I automatically believe that I committed the thought. So if I'm having thoughts of being with somebody else, I automatically associate with the fact that I am a cheater. I cheated on my husband. I'm a terrible person, and I'm not worthy of good things. So it started with what I thought was going to be a good way to get some of this stress out. I started running, which running is not an activity that I've ever really enjoyed. But I started running because I felt so much stress and anxiety. And I honestly felt every day at that point in my life that there was an elephant sitting on my chest. And that was the only way that I could release that. So I started off by just running. I'd pound the pavement. And those first couple weeks when I started experiencing those thoughts, I was not hungry. And I can say I honestly was not hungry. I just felt so sick to my stomach because I blamed myself for everything that I was experiencing. And so I wasn't eating either. So as you can imagine, a significant increase in activity and a significant decrease in intake over a very short period of time will give you quick results, results that I wasn't technically looking for. So I started losing a lot of weight and quickly. And I thought this was a great way to punish myself. I wasn't deserving to eat. I was deserving of feeling the pain of running on no food or energy. And I was deserving of the results that were coming because of that. So before I knew it, in a matter of, I would say 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, I slipped really deep into full-blown anorexia. I started to, it's hard to explain, but it's almost like this significant brain shift. And I didn't realize it at the time, but now with the therapy that I'm in and with the help of Annie, I've really been able to recognize that it's super noticeable in me. All of a sudden, what did not become food focused became all food and exercise focused. It was all I could think about. And then I started noticing other things too, hindsight 2020. I started realizing that I couldn't focus at all. I stopped reading. I love to read. I stopped reading. I couldn't focus. I'd have conversations with my husband in the car, and he'd be 3/4 of the way into this conversation, and he'd ask me a question, and I'd realize I have no idea what he was talking about. I was extremely irritable with him and my kids, my colleagues. I started avoiding people. It got so bad that at work, during any form of break, I would not go to the break room. I would not, drink anything or eat anything. I would go to a private space that I found, and I would just exercise intensely. During that time, I experienced times where even the slightest thing would throw me off with food. So this one situation, I always remember this because Annie has brought this up before, is so my kids were really little at that time, and they used to eat their applesauce out of these little pouches. And so when I would fill these pouches with applesauce, they would always squirt out the top a little bit. And historically, what mom doesn't do this, right? I would just grab it and quick lick that part off and then close the pouch and be done with it. And I started getting to the point where I would lick that part off and I would spit it into the sink, because even that little dollop of applesauce was too much, and it didn't fit inside my set of rules. My safe foods became a very, very, very small list in a very short period of time. I pretty much was eating vegetables and
Hummus.
Yeah, apples. And I mean, I even got to the point where I wasn't eating that. Like it was, I would literally just put vegetables in a bowl and that's all I was eating. And then I would go out and I'd run every night. I was running 4.2 miles and my pace was like 7 minutes and 30 seconds, which for me, oh my gosh, I'm lucky if I run a 10-minute mile because I hate running.
Right.
So for me, like that's just not normal. I was overexerting. I started getting heart palpitations. And ultimately what happened is I lost a lot of weight, a significant amount of weight in a very, very short period of time. And my therapist noticed and started telling me he thought that I really needed, another level of help. And I can be very black and white in my thinking. And I can also be very determined at times, even when I'm not right. And so I just told him, no, I wasn't interested. I wasn't sick. I didn't know what he was talking about. I was doing this in a healthy way. I was using exercise as a form of stress relief. Who wouldn't be doing that at this point in time? And then one night I was laying in bed with my husband and he turned to me and he said, I think you're going to die. And something just clicked. I looked at him and I was astounded. First of all, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe that came out of his mouth. And then I really started to like process. And I remember the next day I had an appointment with my therapist and I went in and time we have to do something because he told me he thinks I'm going to die. And now I think I might die if I don't get a hold of it. So that is when I was recommended to do inpatient for my eating disorder at a local behavioral health hospital. And that was not an option for me because I had kids at home and I really did not want to take time away from them. So I opted for partial hospitalization. So that's about 5 days a week, approximately, 7 to 8 hours a day. And that is where I met Annie.
Yay. Well, and Brooke, like, you're highly intelligent. You know a lot about mental illness on the whole, right? Not only from personal experience, but from education as well. You are not, and I think this can go for quite a lot of people. You are not really like treatment was not going to work for you on those like that level of care. Right. And that was quite evident. I mean, you came to group and you participated at mealtime and you did the things, but it wasn't helping you. And it really came down to individual one-on-one work that you're able to do with a therapist, a dietitian, a psych, etc. So and I want to make that clear because for listeners, like some of you might be able to relate to what Brooke is talking about, and some of you might not be able to relate because of the depth in which it is. But what I can say is a lot of people are opposed to treatment who really need to go to treatment. Right. And there are some people that just get a therapist, just get a dietitian, just start the basic wraparound care. Yeah. Makes a huge difference, right? And it was from that point when you did enter treatment that things did get better for you, even though you'd probably argue treatment was stupid, it's stupid.
I'm going to be honest, it was tough. And I think that that is a reason why I didn't like it is with my obsessive compulsive disorder, I'm a perfectionist. I drive to please everyone around me and I will do it at any cost to myself. Because that's where it breeds, that's what it thrives on. So treatment was going to be the same thing, right? I was going to go in, I was going to do what I was asked, wham, bam, be done, healthy, good. To my surprise, that's not how it went. It was extremely difficult and very challenging. And there are just a couple little snapshots that I remember from my experience there. And one of them was the very first day I walked in and it was breakfast. And I walk into the cafeteria and realize that, first of all, I am locked inside of the cafeteria. And I was like, what is this place?
That's crazy.
And then I pick up my first breakfast and it has every food group that I don't eat, right? It's got half of an English muffin. Well, at that point, I wasn't eating grains or carbs. No way, right? It had butter. Yeah, right. Fat. You're insane. So I remember I sat down and I looked at my tray and I looked around at the other people in my group and I was like, let me guess. You don't get out of here unless you eat this. And they were like, you got that right. And they're like, or you could opt to go up the street, which would be inpatient.
Right.
So I was like, wow. And so I remember I tried to tell the person that was with us, that was working, like, I don't eat these food groups. And they're like, your eating disorder doesn't eat those food groups. And I was like, oh my gosh, here we go.
Yeah.
So choked it down. It was awful. And I still remember every second of it.
Oh yeah.
But this, you know what, this gives me opportunity really. And Annie, I think we've had this conversation before, but just to really thank you. You made a significant difference in my life, which is why I came hunting you. Later on, when I needed a dietitian brought into my outpatient therapy regimen. But another story I remember from treatment that involved Annie was one day we went into this kitchen where we could make food, and Annie was so excited. She always has so much energy, and her excitement about food is just, well, at that time, not contagious, right?
Probably true.
So Annie's like, oh my gosh, everyone, guess what? We're making pizzas today. And I was like, wow, this is terrible. And so I just remember you spent so much time in there with us, and you really you beat it like a dead horse of just not allowing food to affect your mood, to affect your being, to affect your choices in life.
Yeah.
And it was at that point in time that I kind of made the connection and just realized how much I had allowed that to happen, or my eating disorder had allowed that to happen.
Right.
I had every feeling in the world about food, but at that point in time, I lacked all those feelings towards all the other things in my life that should have mattered.
Right.
So between you bringing me to crazy restaurants and making me order not in the salad section, I mean, I could go on and on.
It's hard.
They were all very, very, very challenging for me.
Yeah.
I did not always succeed. But that definitely was the starting point to my recovery.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and say that I haven't had, fallbacks. I think everyone does, but the one thing that I recognized is with each one, it seems to come back a little bit quicker and a little bit stronger every time.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
How much time do you feel like it's taken you to change food rules? And you might still have how many food rules did you have to how many you have now over the years? And how long did it take to change?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was back in 2016. We're in 2022.
So here we are.
Years. I mean, my food rules were extensive. I could have written a novel back at that point in time. At this point in time, I still struggle. I'm not going to lie. One of the things I still struggle with is, so with an eating disorder, or with my experience with my eating disorder, I became very good. I was always counting calories in my head. So and my OCD gives me this ability to memorize a lot of things. Yeah. So I was very able of categorizing foods and their caloric content, their serving size, their everything in my head. I also like to eat a lot of the same things. I'm a routine. I am just a routine. And so even to this day, even though I'm not measuring out all of my food on a scale like I used to, I still struggle from time to time, and I'll count my crackers to make sure that they're fitting within the serving size. So that's actually a challenge that I've given myself recently, is to just grab a handful, because a handful is going to be about that, but it's going to be give or take. But in the past, I didn't like give or take. I wanted black and white. So if the serving size was 13, then 13 it was.
Yeah.
I eat a lot of chocolate and a lot of ice cream now, and that took me a really, really long time to get to. I've listened to your podcast, and oh gosh, if I would have been my past self, there are so many times I would have been like, you're full of it.
Yeah.
You would have turned it off.
I don't believe you. This is not possible. Right. I totally associated certain foods with immediate weight gain.
Sure.
And I remember probably about, maybe a year ago, give or take, Annie challenged me to eat ice cream, which is one of my favorite things to eat, every night for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I think it was. And I would weigh in every time that I met with Annie, just to make sure that my weight was on track. And I remember weighing in, and we went to our meeting together, our appointment, and she goes, so what's your weight? And I remember I was like, I'm not telling you.
Yeah.
And you were like, why? And I was like, because you were right. And you were like, oh, what does that mean? And I weighed exactly the same that I did 3 weeks prior, with having eaten ice cream every
night. Yep. Right.
So, but I will sit here and tell you, there are still days that my eating disorder decides to rear its ugly head and is very noisy and will tell me the opposite.
Right.
So, it takes a lot of effort. Something in the past that I feel like I've always been looking for a cure. I've always been looking for a cure to my OCD. I've always been looking for the end game to my eating disorder. And I have now accepted the fact that these things are likely going to be a part of my life, but with hard work and determination, I can really, live a better quality life with symptom management. And some days are easy. Some days are more difficult, and some days straight up suck. So,
So, you talk about that and you talk about recovery. And to me, what you just described is what recovery looks like.
Yeah.
So whether it's an eating disorder, or OCD, or any mental illness that someone might have, when you don't just get over it. It doesn't just go away. It's always going to be there to some degree. So just is that how you interpret recovery as well? And what does that look like to you in terms of recovery?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned before, good days, mediocre days, and bad days. I have days where something in the past that I struggled a lot with was body checking and body comparison. So my body checking for me specifically looked like measuring my upper arm, pinch testing the skin around my abdomen, sucking in my abdomen to ensure that it's not touching my waistline, things like that. I used to body check anywhere between 100 to 200 times a day.
Oh my goodness.
And now I would say I average, now I'll have days where it's like 3 or less. But still on my hardest days, I would say it's maybe 15 to 20. So it's improved significantly. And there are times where I just really have to hold myself accountable at this point for everything that I've learned, and go back to the fact of remembering what works, what has worked, and what works. So there are days when I do have that just increased urge to body check, that I have to talk myself through it. I have to say, what is this doing? What's the benefit to this? And trying to discourage myself. And another thing that helps me a lot too is to delay. So if I'm having like really strong urges to body check, I'll just be like, okay, let's not body check for the next 10 minutes. And my hopes obviously is that the urge dies out in that 10 minutes and then I don't end up doing it, which does work sometimes.
Absolutely. So you talked a little bit about running and how you use that as a stress reliever. And I think a lot of us listeners, people in general, use exercise to do that. They use it for weight management, and exercise is used as a tool with these types of things. But what's certainly your impact with exercise is it kind of led you down a eating disorder road into treatment. What do you notice just in the mental health world about exercise and its relationship to mental health? Do you notice more harm than good? I mean, what do you see?
So I definitely, just speaking from my own experience, I definitely think that exercise is a good thing for mental health. It does give you a sense of release. It gives you, for people who maybe struggle to have me time or alone time, it gives you that opportunity to have that. I think the biggest difference is exercising for weight management and exercising for health. So I used to exercise for weight management, right? I used to run myself to death to just continue to lose more and more and more and more. And it's funny because through, years of treatment and whatnot, I've come to realize, and I'm able to acknowledge the fact that I don't like to run. Running is not enjoyable for me. And every time I've tried to run, it leads me down the same path. So it's just not the option for me. And so in the past handful of months, I've picked up activities that I really enjoy. I love to dance. So I go to a couple dance classes a week. I love to ride my bike. I'll take my bike to some of my doctor's appointments if I have the opportunity to do so. And I walk my dogs because dogs need to be walked. So it's been a very different experience. I don't feel obligated to do these things like I felt obligated to run. I enjoy them when I'm doing them. I look forward to doing them, but I don't have the same connection. I'm not doing the activities anymore to lose weight. I'm doing the activities to be healthy.
You're not doing the activity to eat. You're not doing the activity to punish yourself. You're not you're doing activity now out of enjoyment.
Right.
And that was a big turning point,
Yes.
to me, that's like huge steps into recovery when a person can change that outlook. I mean, that's huge. So, I mean, that can really pave your course a little bit better for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about media content? So did you ever have the influence of social media, and how do you feel like social media affects, quote unquote, normal people who might not have, an eating disorder or just disordered eating?
So first of all, just to comment on that, normal.
Yeah, quote unquote.
Okay, so I have spent, I should say, hours on hours on hours in my treatment sessions trying to figure out how I could make myself normal.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even know what normal is.
Right.
What is normal? We don't know.
Nope.
I just need to be able to find a balance in my life that creates opportunity for me to enjoy it in a healthy manner and be there for myself and be there for my family.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to make that little cliff note on the whole
I love it
thing, because I'm definitely not normal. I don't think anyone is. But social media. So thankfully for me, I actually stopped engaging in social media probably about, I don't know, 8 to 10 years ago. So I was kind of out of the game for a really long time, which was probably really good for me, because I can only imagine with what I see now, how that would have significantly impacted me and probably made my outcomes significantly worse.
Or prolonged treatment.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
prolonged the whole experience.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because comparison was such an issue for me. I mean, I would go to the pool with my kids and I would spend the whole time looking at every single other individual to assess, am I skinnier than them? Are my legs thicker than theirs? And I wasn't even able to enjoy the time that I had there at the pool with my children. So when it comes to social media and me having the problem with comparison, that would have been a huge issue, because it would have been an endless feed of people to compare myself to. I think the other thing is, and so this is really interesting because I know you guys have talked about this before, but so one thing that I struggle with my OCD, which I have for a long time, is analyzing, reassurance seeking, and checking. After I had my first child, the internet became my best friend. I would spend hours on hours checking just a variety of things. When he was an infant, I would check, am I being a good mom? Google, am I being a good mom?
Yeah, right.
I mean,
right.
I would Google the most generic questions. And of course, it feels like every time you Google something, it tells you you're going to have cancer.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
I mean, it's always the negative, right? It's always the worst case scenario, which then I would just ruminate about for hours and hours and hours on end. So I am very thankful, very, very thankful to have the opportunity to have the treatment team that I do. That leads me back to one of the reasons I do this is to increase access to resources, because it's just not out there. I mean, I'm thankful to have the things I need in my life to be able to find these resources, and it's still extremely difficult. Very grateful for.
What's been your experience coming back onto social media now that you've joined social media?
Yeah. So I guess to talk about that. So recently I decided that I'm going to write a book about my experience. So I'm starting out by blogging at smashingstigmas.com. And that's just to give me the opportunity to kind of outline my book. And also share it with people in hopes that people who are struggling or people who are supporting people that are struggling can read it and can make a connection, and it can help them. And with a blog comes the social media aspect. So I was very hesitant to open that again. But I do have to say that because in the past I was so against social media, in my experience, it has allowed me to place a lot of internal filters into what I do. So if I'm on Twitter and I'm consistently getting fed tweets that are very negative, are not in a progressive movement or forward moving or, positive, I delete them. I delete the ability to see them. I don't read them. Same thing with Instagram. I try to really keep it to reliable sources, people who are trained to do the things that they say that they're doing. So I try to keep everything kind of aligned with that. So that, because the other important thing for me too is I want to make sure that if I'm sharing information with people to help them, then I'm sharing good information. You know, with good resources and good backup, because there is so much garbage out there.
Right.
Have you had any trolling or people say things that are like,
so I haven't had like any negativity yet, but I
Good.
know it's coming. And I've prepared myself for that. You know, there's always gonna be, what do they call them? "Quote unquote" haters, right? But I keep reminding myself why I'm doing it. I'm doing it to increase awareness, to decrease stigmas, and to increase access to resources. That's why I'm doing it. And I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing to help people. And if there's people out there that don't like it, that's okay. I mean, to each their own. Everyone has the right to, you know, like and dislike the things that they do. But I don't foresee that being a, you know, a stop sign for me in what I'm doing.
do you see, because you have a different lens or multiple lenses, do you see a lot of disorder in the community or just in people in general, just disordered eating, or perhaps where you're like, oh man, that person is really sick?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. 100%. And it is difficult for me because when I experience that and have interactions with people that are giving me kind of that vibe, it really checks into my eating disorder. And my brain starts, you know, I start thinking, oh, maybe I should be doing it again because I could look like that. Or one of the places that is the toughest for me is I do go to a gym, because my gym has some of the dance classes that I really do enjoy taking. But, you know, I'll be in the locker room sometimes and I see people stepping on the scale multiple times. I see people that are extremely thin and they're doing excessively long cardio workouts. You know, I've witnessed, I go to the sauna occasionally. And that has been something I've struggled with. In the past, I used that as a form of self-punishment. I would go in there for long periods of time until I was so dizzy and I couldn't breathe. And now I'm trying to form a healthy relationship with it. I do it once in a while for an allotted, you know, amount of time. But sometimes I'm in there and I see people working out in the sauna. And that's just, nothing about any of those scenarios scream healthy to me anymore. But it is very challenging for me because in those moments, you know, in the situation of the sauna, my eating disorder will rear its ugly head and it will start to think, you know, maybe you should be doing that. Well, why aren't you doing that? You've let yourself go. You've lost control. And that's when I have to work on a lot of that, you know, positive talk of, I'm healthy now. People aren't afraid that I'm going to die anymore. I'm not afraid that I'm going to die anymore. I don't have heart palpitations. My sodium and my potassium are stabilized. This is where my body wants to be, even if I don't love it all the time. But yes, I see a lot of that, and especially in a gym atmosphere.
Absolutely. Do you have a resources that you want to talk about in terms of anyone who might have disordered eating and be in denial about it, or your gym goers, or even full-blown eating disorders, athletes, anything? What resources do you offer?
You.
Yeah.
Her name's Annie Weiss, everyone. If you're looking for a dietitian, call her.
That's awesome.
So no, like I said before, though, I am very thankful. I do have a full treatment team. I have a psychiatrist who I see every 4 to 6 weeks. I have a therapist who I'm still currently seeing 1 to 2 times a week. And I see Annie, who is my dietitian. We recently moved to about every 6 to 8
6 to 8 weeks. Yeah.
Yep. But in the beginning it was every week. So I definitely think, you know, if you feel like you're experiencing these things, it can't hurt to establish an appointment with somebody. But I will share, at least from my experience, the internet is not the answer. And I'm talking like generic Google. There are some really great groups out there that can provide support, but I would just make sure that they're established, you know, local mental health hospitals that you know are established. You know, they're going to have resources for you. They're going to have community outreach opportunities, etc. But I would just say, if you even question if you're experiencing some of these things, just reach out and get one appointment. You know, you don't have to go back if you don't want to, But I would try, because I think that, at least from my experience, you can have a significant increase in your quality of life. And you would, I've been surprised. I have been very surprised at how much my life has turned around. It is so nice to not think about food all the time.
Yeah.
Well, and think about if you would have had help at 8 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, and
Absolutely.
again, based on what we knew about mental health, or what parents or generationally people were willing to do is another story. But like, get help right away. I mean, ultimately
from people who are qualified.
Correct. Right. And Nicole and I see that all the time, where it's like, you've been dealing with this for years. What? And I get it. Some people need time to, get the gumption to get help. But like, just think of all the time you could have had back, or not thinking about those thoughts. And it's hard. It's hard for people to, let that time go. So it's, but at least you received the help that you did, and you've been doing the work and putting the time in, which is really, really great.
Yeah.
You have a message for listeners?
Oh boy, I'm sure I could be on here for the next hour.
I need you to do this.
I won't take up too much of your time. Yeah, right. A, B, C, D.
Yeah, right.
No, so I would just say that, I'm one person, but I am putting myself out there to try to help people recognize that the things they're experiencing can be quote unquote normal, but they can also get better. So, if you feel like you're experiencing any of these things that we've talked about today, OCD, eating disorder, bipolar, other mental health concerns, please reach out to a local, clinic or hospital and see if they have outreach that can, connect you with somebody to meet with. I do not think that our society puts enough priority on how important mental health is. And I think that's why we still to this day have so many stigmas. I didn't mention this earlier, but I am a nurse by trade. I've worked primarily in operating room services, but I also have worked in mental health. And it's tough to see how easy it is for people to get help with physical disorders. An example I like to give a lot of times is, you think you might have diabetes, or you're not feeling well. So you go in, you meet with a family practice provider, they assess you, they realize that, yep, you're diabetic, and there's a treatment plan for that. And they're able to, provide you with the treatment plan, provide you with the medications, and provide you with opportunity to connect to other people that are more specialized in that topic. I don't see the same thing happening for mental health, and it's really sad, because I think a lot of people in this world suffer for no reason, and it's not fair. I think that mental health and physical health need to be taken in the same light and treated the same. And I think the only way we're going to get there is by doing things like this, talking about it and normalizing the fact that people have these mental health struggles, and I don't have to keep it hidden anymore. This is a part of me, and this is what I've gone through. And these are the experiences that I want to share to help other people.
Right. Yeah.
Brooke, where can people find you?
Oh, on social media. So as I mentioned before, I am writing my blog, which is smashingstigmas.com. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook under Brooke Miller MHA, which stands for Mental Health Advocate. So if you're interested, that's where you can find me. I'd love to hear from you. If any of the listeners have any other questions, I'm very transparent. I set out to be very honest and open. I'd be more than willing to share more experiences with you in detail, or offer you, recommendations from my personal experiences with these.
Awesome. And we'll put your information in the show notes too. So awesome. All that, so people can refer back to. So we always like to finish up our interview questions with one final question of, what is your favorite food?
Oh, I kind of said it before, but I have to. I am a huge lover of dark chocolate, dark chocolate, and ice cream. I will always love ice cream.
Right.
What kind of ice cream?
So, I mean, I'll pretty much eat anything. However, I don't like nuts in my ice cream.
Oh,
Oh,
sure.
texture. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, but
yeah.
I mean, I'll eat. Yeah,
I don't like nuts and brownies. That's weird.
Yep, I don't
Yeah.
like nuts and brownies either.
Yeah. I just want the goo.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes,
that's fine.
definitely.
If you're gonna ask me a favorite flavor, it'd probably be, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Zanzibar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yes.
it's a really rich
Yes.
dark
Yeah.
chocolate
Yeah.
ice cream.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's
Yay.
awesome. Super.
That's awesome. Love it.
Thanks so much, Brooke, for your time today. This was really
Yeah, of
fun
course.
and informative, and I'm sure a lot of people will be able to connect and relate. So good stuff, girl.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have questions you want to hear discussed on the show? Find us on Facebook or visit between2pastries.com and drop us a line. Want to support the show? Find us on Patreon for exclusive content. If you love the show, find us on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. Hit the subscribe button and leave us a review.